I want to consider how evangelical apologists and teachers spread misinformation and disinformation, how they indoctrinate the evangelical audience to be skeptical of public institutions, public domains like climate science, for example. And often you can do so, of course, overtly through direct critique of climate science or biological sciences. For example, you critique biological evolution, say it's false, and so on. But you also do so, they do so specifically through small comments, quips, side remarks, jokes, which perpetuate false beliefs or attitudes about the subject matter, like climate science, and a general skepticism or incredulity toward these public institutions, all while primarily talking about some other topic, so that that skepticism is promoted incidentally to what the main topic may be. I want to give you an example of what I'm speaking about here. This example is from climate change, and it's Frank Turek, the evangelical apologist, talking just 2 days ago about how two of his university scheduled speaking events were canceled due to weather. So let's take a look at that and then debrief it.
But before I do, I want to mention that our William and Mary event, which was snowed out, we've had our first two events at college campuses this year snowed out due to global warming. Okay.
Note first that the main topic here is not climate science, climate change, global warming. The main topic is the cancellation of a university scheduled event at a university campus that Turek is going to do. But within that context, he incidentally makes this comment about quote unquote global warming with respect to the cancellation of these events. What he's doing here is a common strategy of disinformation or de facto misinformation when it comes to climate change. What people will do who are skeptics of human induced climate change is they will point to cold weather events as evidence against global warming or human induced climate change. Now, there are several problems with this. First problem is the use of the term global warming itself rather than climate change, which perpetuates the idea by implication that to look for evidence of global warming should you could look for evidence of warming everywhere, which of course is not true. In fact, climate change that includes overall increase of average temperature on planet Earth is consistent with regional cooling over time. So the change of regional climates. For example, if Greenland were completely to melt due to climate change and the increase of overall temperature on the Earth, that massive influx of cold water into the North Atlantic could, by some models, suppress the Gulf Stream, prevent it from reaching Europe, or at least weaken it, and lead to a mini ice age in Europe, so that you could have global cooling in Europe, even though you had global warming overall. And that is lost when people simply talk about the overall phenomena we're talking about as global warming rather than climate change. So it's significant that Turek chooses to use the word global warming. Now, the next thing to note here is that this is, again, a strategy of disinformation and also de facto misinformation, because what you do is you collapse the distinction between climate and weather. These are obviously not the same thing. You could have severe weather events where there's a period of greater cold in an overall regional warming of a climate. So it might be that in Nebraska or wherever these snowstorms were happening, there has been overall for the last 30 years regional warming of the climate, even though there is a cold weather event. That too is lost when Turek makes this kind of comment and collapses climate change into cold weather event. A third thing to note is that it is a feature of climate change that you have a more erratic and unpredictable climate and thus more erratic weather events, whether it's extreme storms or fires or floods or droughts or blizzards. So, again, all of those are consistent with an overall pattern of warming within the climate. Now, what this then says to me is that at the end, Turek makes this kind of a little laugh or a chortle after making this observation. So what that de facto does is kind of just suggests that it's kind of silly to think that there is overall climate change given the evidence for isolated cold weather events that happened to cancel his university scheduled speaking tour. And this just shows how obviously silly that all is. But in when you have little comments like that over time from evangelical apologists or other people who are viewed as authorities within a particular subculture, they can perpetuate and increase that skepticism of these public institutions, which contributes to indoctrination and skepticism of things like public science. So it's important to recognize that you can indoctrinate people not just through direct critique and rejection of public institutions like science, but also through these side comments, like Turek is doing here. So you need to pay attention to those as much as to the overt disinformation and misinformation that is spread by these teachers. The last thing I want to note is that some people are going to say, yeah, you're making too much of it. He was just joking. You are never just joking. This is important to keep in mind. Humor does things. And here, what you would say from linguistic analysis is that part of the perlocutionary effect of what Turek says here, this side comment, sort of a mocking comment about the idea of global warming being contradicted by cold weather events, the perlocutionary effect on the hearer, the listener, is to, again, reinforce a general skepticism toward climate change and the authority of climate scientists to make informed judgments about these very issues. So, whether or not you want to rationalize what he says here as just joking, you're never just joking. Humor, these side comments have an effect, including increasing skepticism and increasing indoctrination.